Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardena. I am so excited for this week's episode. We are diving in further into Preparedness Month. We've had really incredible leaders already with Cameron Hamilton and Eric from the National Center of Urban Operations on here. And now we have an awesome opportunity. The returning guest always, Pete Gaynor is going to be with us, but it's also his new boss with Joel Welsh with Bright Harbor. They do a lot of stuff with recovery. They help out disaster survivors. It's really incredible that the work that they're doing, and also by bringing in Pete with all of his experience. And so we have a really awesome opportunity to talk to both a founder and an incredible leader in himself, Joel, with Pete Gaynor's experience and bringing in the initiatives that they're starting. Again, I've had Pete on here, 87 times or something like that. It's he's basically the every other week he's our guest, but it's always insightful. And so while you're listening today, you have an opportunity to see the private sector side, you see the public sector side, and again, apply that to your own needs wherever you're at. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joel and Pete. Guys, welcome back to the show.
John, it's good to be back again. You should I should have a subtitle on your show. Yeah, so often.
Yeah. We'll put your name above my name. You're a little more experienced than I am. So the Pete Gaynor and John Scardena podcast.
Mine will be above everyone, just to go say boss.
You and I might have to fight on that boss title. I like that title. So, funny enough, I now that I've been in the private sector for, 5-10 years, I don't think I could ever go back to the public sector. It is so much more liberating to be able to get rid of red tape and just, when you hear a problem set or a challenge, just go, instead of like the 87 steps of bureaucracy. But for all of my friends who are in public safety, good luck, Godspeed, and I wish you well. But with that, Joel, you're the founder of Bright Harbor. I've actually looked you up beforehand. I did a little bit of my research. You've started several companies, as far as I understand. Now you're with Bright Harbor. Tell us specifically what Bright Harbor does.
Amazing. Well, you nailed it. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started a bunch of companies. Also been an investor in a lot of companies. I think I have almost 50 direct investments in technology companies. So seeing this 0 to 1, 0 to big company movement many times. This actually all started for me. My really good friend lost his house in a wildfire in Colorado, the Marshall Fire. And I talked to him the day after it happened. It was like January 1st, 2022. And I had like 15-second phone call with him where he basically told me, I was like, how can I help? And he was like, I just need more hands. And over the ensuing 3 months, I was able to be, slightly helpful to him. I helped him get a personal assistant, and I started thinking a lot about the issues that he was dealing with. And I was like, how does a person like my friend navigate this in the context of insurance coverage going down, disasters increasing in frequency and severity? It felt like a really important problem to solve. And so I spent really a couple of years thinking about the problem set, volunteering for organizations like Team Rubicon, cleaning out houses and mucking them out, visiting places that had natural disasters like fires and hurricanes, and really coming to the conclusion that the way that we are going to solve it is helping individuals to help themselves, information, giving them tools, giving them support to understand the 87 different levels of bureaucracy that even professionals navigate, but now actual humans, families that are traumatized need to navigate. And when you really get into it, it's not that complicated. It's just obscure. And if we give people the tools and the game plan, we can really help them to navigate the process faster, find more money, and ultimately really rebuild in a way that helps them prevent this sort of thing happening to them again.
Recalled for me several experiences in response and recovery that were both heartbreaking at the time and encouraging now. Emergency management is changing. Are you keeping up? The Readiness Lab takes it to the next level with exclusive tabletop exercises, live sessions, and real-world intel. Access the EOC as a TRL insider, train with us through NLEM, or rep the field with our EMTs. Yeah, that's a pun. We also deliver top-tier marketing and design for emergency services and public safety, outreach, product reviews, trade show support, sponsorships, and more. The Readiness Lab is the #1 emergency services podcast network, home of the NLEM certification, bold outreach, and everything pushing the field forward. Learn more at thereadinesslab.com. So in Hurricane Harvey, I was deployed out there for the response stuff, and then I got deployed to the wildfires in California, and then went back to Harvey to help kind of wrap up the transition. And had been now, I think it was almost 6 months after the initial hit. And I actually left to go visit my sister-in-law in Houston, so shout out to her and her family. But I met a woman in a hotel with her kids, and she was going up there. She was borrowing the vacuum from the hotel. And I said, "Hey, like, I'm John," and we started talking in the elevator very briefly. And she said, "You got your own vacuum?" She goes, "I just have to have some sense of normalcy. I've been here since the hurricane hit." And I said, like, I didn't want to let her know who I was working with, obviously. And so I just said, I heard that there's like FEMA trailers and that kind of stuff. She goes, I still don't understand how to go through all those systems. So I called a buddy of mine who was dealing with that. And it was as he was walking me through the process, because that was my side of it, the individual assistance. There was like 9 different logins between the state and federal that survivors needed in order to get a FEMA trailer. And I was just mind blown at the time of just like how maybe not complicated to just what's your name, but just like you're already overwhelmed by losing everything, just like your buddy. And then you have to do all this other stuff. And if you're a single mom with 3 kids in a hotel and you're just trying to survive, that takes forever.
Even if you're not a single mom, even if you're just like a normal family, 2 jobs, and all of a sudden you have no jobs because you can't actually work.
Yeah, and where's the systems that are in place to ensure that, or your documentation? And so maybe Pete can talk about this more in a second, but like looking at that as an example, and your friend as an example, yeah, it's complicated. And having additional resources like Bright Harbor and people to come in there and to support, it's a phenomenal concept. I think at the same time, we also need to look at it from the public side as well and say, how do we protect against fraud, of course, but how do we clean up these systems? I will say, shout out to the city of St. Louis, who, funny enough, just hired our company to specifically look at future disasters and say, can you aggregate all the sources for a survivor so that when we go out there, we can say, here's a list of funding, list of resources, list of nonprofits, whatever, as one starting point, just so when they're in shock and overwhelmed, here's at least something that you can take. And so grateful for that opportunity as well. But Pete, can you talk to the public side of and maybe why you've come over to Bright Harbor looking at those complexities?
Yeah. So, I think, in the EM industry, we say, all disasters begin and end locally, which is true.
Mm.
But what is more true is disasters begin and end with disaster survivors, right? So if you want to go down a level further, all the way to the bottom, it's really about the disaster survivor. And if the disaster survivor can't recover or doesn't recover fast enough, we just had the 20th anniversary of Katrina. The federal government is still paying dollars for Katrina recovery 20 years later. So, I mean, think about it,
It's crazy.
right?
Yeah.
I tell this story where in my first couple of weeks as the deputy FEMA administrator, I had to approve some expenditures for Katrina. And so that was, 5 years ago at the 15-year mark. And I was just approving a couple of $1 million, $8-10 million approvals for high schools, 15 years after Katrina. And today we're still paying for Katrina. So, imagine if you're individual disaster survivor trying to navigate your own recovery in the system that we have, right? So, and I think, once I met Joel and kind of understood what they were doing and got my head into it, for me, it was a no-brainer. It was like, no one's doing this. Somebody should have thought about this thing 20 years ago, and it really is the way to help disaster survivors speed through recovery. And I think generally, right? So whether you're a elected leader, or you're FEMA or you're something else, we always are aimed at how much money we're going to get, right? So how much can we get back from the federal government? How much do we get back from insurance? And for me, that's like half of the problem. So getting the money is half of the problem. And then what do you do with the money? So if you're a homeowner, you have to, you would love to build a new house where your other house got burned out. We have hundreds of LA customers that have the same problem today. And so getting the money is half of the problem. Getting into your new house and sleeping in your bed, right, is going to take years. And so what we try to do is help that disaster survivor navigate this really bureaucratic, obscure kind of recovery. And if you think about it, like, who you call when you need a lift on the side of the road, you call AAA, right? There's an expert that comes and helps you do it. If you need your taxes done, you call, H&R Block, for example. There's an expert out there to do it. But in this disaster recovery world, especially for individuals, there is no one to call until now. So it really, for me, it's a no-brainer. And honestly, some of the stories are wonderful about how people are getting back in their homes quicker, faster, and more financially stable after a disaster.
Please tell me that Bright Harbor's mantra is speed recovery.
It's fine to get home. A little softer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually pretty clever. Okay. Well, you can put a subtitle of speed recovery. Either way, it's the mic drop on both your sides. Funny enough, for contacting Pete and off screen there a little bit, we kept on missing each other in the LA fires. I was out there doing quality control on behalf of the Army Corps of Engineers. Inadvertently, I ended up meeting a lot of the homeowners and talking with them because they would show up and they would be asking questions. And we had everybody from I had everything in place to making this happen. To I was going to rebuild anyways, and this is great timing. That was a bizarre answer, but I would say most of them were still in that shock mode of I don't even know what to do. I've been trying to do my paperwork, it got denied, whatever, and I didn't know about Bright Harbor. And honestly, I probably would have pointed them to you guys because there does need to be a resource. So just to recap what Pete said, AAA for side of the road, H&R Block for taxes, Doberman for emergency plans, because I think he said that too. And then for recovery, Bright Harbor. I think that spans well. Joel, as now that you have these systems in place and you're pulling in Pete for that expertise, what would your situation with your friend be differently now? Like, how would your friend actually walk through their situation step by step with you guys?
Yeah. I want to point out there's a bunch of reasons we're working with Pete, and we worked with him even before we hired him as an advisor. I have famously reached out to every single former FEMA administrator, many of the deputy administrators. I made it a point of meeting all the people in the space, and Pete actually took us to NEMA in Washington, D.C. And a lot of people know Pete, but when Pete walks in the room, people like all turn their head like, Pete. Everyone knows Pete. Everyone wants to talk to him. He's trusted across the aisle. And when he introduced us, he was like genuinely excited about what we were doing. He genuinely thought what we were doing was important, and felt like there was an opportunity to bring what we're doing to more people through government. How do we embed what we're doing as part of the operating procedure for local, regional, eventually national emergency response? And one of the big things we've talked a lot about is how disaster case management really kicks in a year later and is really for picking up pieces of people they don't know what to do with. But many of the regional leaders and politicians really want people in their homes faster, right? Bringing the community back, bringing the restaurants back, bringing the stores back, bringing the businesses back. You need the homes back to do that. And the faster that happens, the more sustainably that happens, the better for everyone and better for that community. And so really figuring out, is there a product and a service that really fits into that, maybe not day zero, but as recovery starts, is there a set of tools, technology, services that the government can help to deploy that helps everyone, not just the people who really can't, after a year, help themselves? And so that's really like the idea and sort of Pete's, fundamental belief system and thought, and one of the reasons we brought him on to help lead that charge. As far as what we do today, a disaster survivor signs up on the web. They get assigned a disaster recovery advisor. These are people with a dozen years experience doing all sorts of different types of disaster recovery. So we have insurance adjusters, we have case managers from FEMA and past disasters, we have case managers from like housing and other kinds of work. And they basically sit down and have an hour-long phone call with the survivor. They go through a checklist of all the different opportunities that survivor might have for financial assistance. So we'll look at insurance, we'll look at FEMA, SBA, all the different forms of FEMA. We'll put them into our system and look at all the private and public grants that are available. And then we'll walk them through what a survivor experience and recovery plan looks like. So first things first, you're going to go through the insurance process. Here are things you're going to look for. Here's the type of stuff they're going to ask. So for instance, many of them will need to list out all the items they have for the personal property. And so we have some tools to help them do that. We have specialized estimates for people who have issues with figuring out how much they actually lost. So like, I lost my home. The person wants to build a brand new home. Well, it's not the same as the old home. And now they have to go through a whole process of back and forth with their insurance company and FEMA and other people. We have a number of people in our network who actually help them to prepare a house that was estimate. And what that is like, here's the house I used to have. I have all the documents for that. And I have a person who's actually estimated with today's labor rates and today's costs, exactly how much it would cost to rebuild that home. And then that can be submitted to FEMA, to the insurance company. And it really makes the entire process much more seamless. So that's one of the things that we deploy. We help them to prepare essentially a budget. Hey, from this amount minimum to this amount maximum we think you'll get from insurance, here's how much you might get from FEMA. Here's how much the SBA loan program could help you. Here's like directionally what it would cost you over a number of years to have that kind of loan. Here are private grants that you can apply for, and it will help them apply for them. And then help them to navigate each of those processes. So they have questions, things come up. Hey, I was denied from FEMA, or FEMA's asking for this, or insurance is asking for this. How do I prepare that? And we'll give them practical tips, advice, tools to do all that. Once they have made a decision on whether they're going to rebuild, they're going to buy something new, or they're going to repair, we actually introduce them to a vetted network of contractors that can do that work, or home builders that are going to rebuild their homes, so they can start getting quotes and very quickly go from that. Like, hey, I'm going to have a random person show up my house. No, like a person who's been vetted, is insured, works with a lot of the insurance companies, might even have those insurance companies in network, so they don't have to go to do some direct billing. And then we stay on them. We're with them for as long as they need us to navigate all of those various avenues for money and ultimately decisions around rebuilding or repair.
When I'm hearing that, I'm putting on my public safety hat. I'm a county emergency manager, or I work for the state, and I hear about a private entity, all of a sudden my wall goes up. And I can see a lot of emergency managers even listening now, like that's great in concept, but my wall is going up. How do I trust you? And to be honest, I wouldn't trust you unless you hired Pete. And the fact that you hired Pete is like, oh, okay, like I can trust this source. The other thing that will give you a lot of credibility is just time, right? And like helping that disaster survivor. I loved how you said it wasn't complex in the beginning. You must be highly intelligent, because you just made it sound very complex. Protect your school, venue, facility, or community with Doberman Emergency Management's specialized 3x3 approach. We do this with protecting life, property, and continuity of operations through advanced planning, training, and assessments. Learn more about our cutting-edge approach with world-class professionals in emergency services today at DobermanEMG.com. Are you looking for bleeding control equipment? Impulse by Doberman Bleeding Control Equipment is professional grade and built to save lives. From the Responder Pro Sling for first responders to wall-mounted kits with AEDs, compact packs for ushers and security, and the MCI resupply cache for standby teams, get your Impulse kits and training from impulsekits.com.
I will say it's complex. When I'm describing some sort of set of services that touch every kind of survivor, it's going to sound complicated because every single one of them is like completely different. Like if you have, 6 inches of flood water in your home and need to do some repair, it's a much different scenario, recovery, timeline, needs, than a person who's lost their entire home in a wildfire.
Bingo.
So when I'm describing all the various ways, I'm describing a gigantic tree of options. But when I'm getting with John, and John has 6 inches of water in his house, like it's a much more simple process. Like here are your financial opportunities. Like we're going to go through each one, make sure you understand it, give you the links you need, give you tools that you might need, and ultimately like output a recovery plan for you, right? We're trying to take something that's very complicated and make it simple for them. But yeah, on the back end, dealing with all these different people is complex.
Okay. Yeah, sure. What is the standard length of time for somebody to complete all that stuff without you guys? And what are you trying to get them down to?
So I'll give you the bottom line up front. I think one of the things we're most proud of is one of our LA customers that lost their homes is the first resident in LA to get a building permit.
Holy cow.
So
period. That's a call out. You should have led with that. Like
period, right? So we're pretty proud about that. There'll be many more, but this is all about like speeding that recovery so you can get back into your home faster, right? Again, Katrina, 20 years and we're still paying money on it.
That's ridiculous.
It is, right? So we want to speed that recovery. And again, I think to Joel's point, it's from the simple, right, to the really complex and convoluted, right? So I'm not sure you can say, we can have it by X because everyone is unique. But the one thing that's common is we're going to be with you the entire way, whether you need us for a month or you want to need us for a year. And we have customers that we've had for a year. So
there are things that are complicated in a normal recovery, but let's assume for a second that the survivor has nothing wonky in their sort of profile, and they lost their home, and they have insurance money, they're going to rebuild, they've already decided that, and many of the things are just like there are processes to go through, and we're going to make sure that when they're filling out the FEMA paperwork or they're giving information to their insurance company, that we've given them the tools to make sure that the first time they're submitting it in a way that's going to fly through the process. They're not going to have something they missed in sort of that bureaucracy. But there are lots of other complicated things that happen, and I'll give you one that's really interesting. So we have a client in LA who wants to get the SBA loan. They actually need the SBA loan to rebuild. They need the full amount to start building. They happen to have an IRS issue that is unresolved from a couple of years ago. And the SBA has a process of you can apply for it, but they're not going to approve and give you money until your outstanding IRS issue is resolved. Problem is that the IRS person who was on that person's case was fired as part of this reshuffling that happened in the current administration. And IRS is just not responding. Like there's no response at all from the IRS. So one of the things we were able to do for this client is send a note on their behalf we have a sort of back channel in the SBA. They have some people that will look at these sort of weird cases and be like, hey, this is happening. What should this person do? And they actually gave a readout of like, here's the person to contact. Here's like what you should write. And so now they actually have a piece of paper that says, hey, this is approved pending a IRS resolution. Now they have to figure out how to do the IRS, which we have no back channel for. But a lot of disaster survivors have these wonky things that come up that you just need to work through. And part of what we're doing is helping people to identify ways around these roadblocks or ways to think about a roadblock that may not keep them from roadblocking. Okay, you're gonna get this money. Go ahead and start planning the rebuild and just parallel processing that versus just stopping everything and not working on it.
So John, just like I think for context about like why is this so important, whether you have Bright Harbor or not. But I think one of the things that the underlying problem in America is 2/3 of homeowners are underinsured, right? So whether you have a disaster, or whether you have a localized flood, or whether you have just a traditional house fire, you are you most likely 2 out of 3 Americans are underinsured. So just the basic trying to get back into your house with home insurance without a disaster is problematic for 2/3 of America. So now you add in a disaster, and so um, it's one of those things that I don't think many people appreciate. I think most people, when they look at they buy a new home, they build a new home, they get insurance because they have a mortgage on it, and everyone knows that, and they whatever that number is on insurance, they probably are okay with that, because without insurance, you're not going to live in that house. And no one ever looks at their insurance policy, right? And I have friends that thought they were insured for full replacement costs, had a house fire, and find out not true. And they hadn't looked at their policy for years. And so one of the things we want to do, right, is like do some pre-law stuff. Like, we have a tool that you can put in your policy, and we can analyze it to say, are you underinsured, overinsured, or are you just right? But it all goes back to like risk, right? So if you don't understand your risk, you can't take action to mitigate that risk. And so whether you don't know you live in a flood zone, or you don't know you live in at the base of a volcano, if you don't understand the risk, you can't take action. So those are some of the things we want to do ahead of time, again, to make this whole disaster recovery thing a little bit easier for disaster survivors.
Like a homeowner hazard vulnerability assessment, essentially. Yeah. The funny enough, we introduced that concept one of our first years of podcasting, and that is probably still to date the number one email I get is, "Hey, tell us more about homeowner whatever." But that's not like my shtick, and so we point them towards like a bunch of different websites. But if you guys can aggregate that all within Bright Harbor, like, even better. And to Joel's point, you're calling out, and really both of you have called out excellent sides of this coin. And again, putting on that public safety hat, the way that wall gets dropped for me when I go in there in private sector, and you guys just both answered it as well, is I can take things off your plate. A big way, the number one way emergency managers get fired is because of public messaging. Number two often is because there is a perceived political issue where the emergency manager didn't help out their constituents. And if Bright Harbor is going in there and working with the individual survivors to help that survivor all throughout the entire process, whether it's a month or a year, again, that emergency manager gets to breathe a little bit easier for their own career, for helping out survivor, because that's the mission, but also for the individual. Man, the fact that you said parallels, like, why start and stop and start and stop and just keep moving forward? You both are calling out things that I think a lot of people need to hear, and really what we need to address. Again, I think there's both sides of this. The public side is, funny enough, when you brought up IRS, I died a little bit inside, because I called FEMA the IRS of disasters just a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and I think it's because it's so complex. Like, so no one knows where they're at in the process, and all of a sudden it's just like crickets. You're like, well, I lost everything. I haven't heard anything. Hopefully they're looking at it. With Bright Harbor, it sounds like they don't have to feel like that anymore.
And John, just to kind of drive a point home, because I think you asked about EMs would tune out the private sector coming in to help you, and so I'm not sure that's. I mean, I think you're right. Essentially, this is new to the industry. We don't have as wide a brand name recognition as we're gonna have. I have no doubt about that. And EMs, and right? EMs, we love response, right? We love the whole response thing. It's all about, if you're gonna do a little bit of pre-response stuff, planning and training and exercise, we're good at all that. We love to respond, right? We love to respond. And then what we're really horrible at, and I've said this both as the administrator and I continue to say it, what we're really horrible at as a emergency management industry is recovery, because we just think somebody else is going to do that. And we're not vested in recovery as a profession. And so I think if you want to be the best emergency manager that you can, it's like, yes, you have to do preparedness stuff, you have to do response stuff, and you have to get deeper invested into recovery, because the recovery part is about your constituents. So what is you have a plan to respond, but what's your plan to help your constituents recover fully? And again, it's we let the disaster survivor go out in this really convoluted scavenger hunt for all these things, and we just say, good luck, let us know when you have a house, or if you run into problems. And we don't care about permitting, we don't care about all the other things that you have to do to actually get in your house, and then add in the 2/3 of America is underinsured. And so I think emergency managers, you need to get more invested in long-term recovery, especially when it comes to your disaster survivors. Disaster survivors, right, if they don't recover, then they're moving out of your community. They're not buying at businesses. They're not paying taxes, right? They're not going to school. You're not sending your kids to school. All those kind of things will erode your local community. So you need to get invested in long-term recovery. So I think this is a problem that I like to see, and again, I agree. FEMA and SBA, not really helpful, and make it easier, right? It is convoluted. So we need to do work on that. And hopefully we do with the new bill, and the president's council, FEMA council. So we'll see where it all goes. Their goal is more survivor-centric, and so that's where it needs to go. I'm fully behind it. But emergency managers, we're really good at response in America, but we're not so good at recovery.
Bright Harbor, finding your way home without the scavenger hunt. You're welcome. You're new PR guy. All right, Joel.
OU equity. I was just going to say, I'm struck by some of the sort of the gaps when I talk to emergency managers. And especially at NEMA, Pete introduced me to quite a few. And there is so much information that is gathered from press, from people calling the emergency manager or calling the governor or calling the mayor, and that information filtering down. And there's a lot of information that they can get from like police and fire, actually, like situational awareness, like what are you seeing, what roads are washed out, what needs to be fixed. But virtually nothing at a systematic level, situational awareness from actual survivors.
Bingo.
I think some of the stories that we have, when combined together, hundreds of people, thousands of people, we're like, here are actual issues happening with permitting. Here's actual issues happening with these grant programs, or here's actual issues happening with lack of hotel rooms or price gouging. Like all of those things can be bubbled up. And now the emergency manager, the political echelon actually have information to go off of that can actually be responsive to the needs of their community versus trying to be reactive to the small tidbits of information they're getting, that filter through the angry media.
I'm going to need you to come back on and just talk about that for 30 minutes, because you just got me really excited. Essentially, ICS 100 has an entire section about the intelligence section, and I have never found that to be true. And, our situational awareness, our data gathering, and I'm going to call out FEMA here a little bit because I like a lot of FEMA people, but when they're talking about their 22 standard maps in response and recovery, and they're not able to use true data science and get all those tidbits of information to, like we talk about a common operating picture, but we miss out on so much information. You just nailed it. We need to get, in fact, I want to ask you a question, and I know we're out of time here, but this is so important to me. Analytics. You come from a perspective of investing, I think you said, in 50 technology companies. You have to love technology and analytics and data science and the whole thing. When I went over to Apple, I had a big shock moment, I think, almost like a nightmare scenario where I thought I understood analytics. And then I met everybody at Apple, and I said, oh, like we don't do intelligence gathering like the way we could. Did you have that same like thought process when you're like, wait, how is this even possible? Like a big question mark?
No, this anecdote is going to blow your mind. I volunteered with Team Rubicon one of the deployments that I did was north of Houston. It was a flood, and I was one of the first teams on the ground to do to like gather information, identify homes that needed support, and then like put them into our system. And they got a download from FEMA and from the sort of Texas state system. So like I forgot the name of it. It's disaster. Anyways, like disaster survivors can sign up for this thing, and they give you an output. It's in a CSV file format. Team Rubicon has their own system, and you're like, cool. We're gonna go out and get in the cars, and we're gonna go like drive out and like check out these houses. I'm like, cool. How are we gonna do that? Like, oh, just take the phone, take the address, and put it into Google Maps. So they're about to like go off and like are inputting it by hand. And I was like, wait, like some of these addresses. I was like, some of these addresses are like across towns. I was like, we're not doing that again. So I went in. I downloaded the CSV file. I put it into using the API for Google Maps, and I created a custom Google Maps sheet that just showed on a map every single like red dot, and it allowed
Can I be your best friend?
the map to just put information.
That's exactly what I
Guys,
did.
So,
Yes.
like we'll cover this side of town, and you guys cover this side of town, and like the next we did all of them, and it was like, wow, that thing is amazing. And I was like, man, that is like the smallest,
Simplest
amount of work you can do on this.
Yes. Oh my! I'm too excited for this moment because that's verbatim what I did. I got out to the wildfires, and we had to do quality control over 100 homes a day. Well, their goal was like 20, but I knew we could get to 100, and I was like, all right, let's input all these addresses through like GIS, and I watched them individually put an address in it at the time, and they were just guessing where to go next, and I was like, what? My very first day, I got to 57. The next person got 15. They're like, how'd you do that? I'm like, because half the addresses are next door to each other. And I couldn't believe the amount of pushback I got. Like, whoa. Like, we don't need to do all that. Like, I don't think that saves that much time. I like 3 or 4 days later, I like had to like I had to go somewhere to help out like another staff member, and they didn't use it. And half of them were like, see, it was fine. The other half were like, dude, we only got like a 10th done of what we've been getting done the last 3 or 4 days. And they couldn't go back. And to the point where they caught up. They didn't think it was possible to catch up to all the homes that they were supposed to look at. And I was like, guys, this is not even like the bare minimum here. Like, how did you use Google every day, like Google Maps or otherwise? How did you not even know about this? So the fact that you did that exact same process, yeah, I'm gonna endorse Bright Harbor for that fact alone. Yeah, Bright Harbor for the win. Honestly, if you just had a tool that did that, everybody should. Oh my gosh, it drives me crazy.
That tells you all you really need to know about the level of technology, investment in a bunch of these systems. But it's essentially what we're trying to do is like, hey, we're trying to take a technology first approach. You can't be all technology. You need humans, you need insights, you need data gathering that is sort of like on the ground. But ultimately, how do you bring a technology focused approach to everyone? And that's the only way you're going to help thousands or tens of thousands or millions of disaster survivors all at once, which is leverage technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the pushback on technology usually goes something like, well, like if we get hit by the EMP, that will never happen. How are we going to operate if we got used to technology? And my pushback always is, so your fear of something that has never happened is the reason why you're not going to use every tool imaginable not to help out the survivor. And then the real reason comes out. Well, I just don't know how to use that stuff. Well, there you go. Like, you just don't want to learn. Like, that's your real problem.
I know we're very over, but I do think that there is a common misconception within the EM world, and I heard this across the board from various people, where there's this like expectation that government is supposed to do things for a constituent. Like, hey, if we're going to make a system, we need to have be able to phone call in. It needs to be in multiple languages. It has to like service every single person every single way, and it's supposed to do it for them. And if we're not going to do it for them, it's not going to get done. But that's actually not true. Like, humans are very smart. Like, these disaster survivors are smart. They're professionals. They use technology. Like, if we give them the tools and we show them how to do it, they can do it themselves. They don't need us to do. Bright Harbor is not doing anything for anybody. We don't do anything. We help them do it for themselves. And once they know how to do it, once they have the tools, they can fly through the process themselves. They don't need people to handhold them.
Bright Harbor, doing it for yourself, finding your way home without the scavenger hunt, speed recovery.
Find your way home, which is also now like we find you a new home.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're coming back on the show, 100%. Pete, sorry, you're not. You're
out.
You're out. No, we love Pete.
Yeah, you can have a whole technology hour with Joel. Yeah.
You know what? Emergency managers need some tech.
I agree.
I still remember an individual from FEMA headquarters flying down when they found out my FCO approved me getting a drone for PDAs and freaking out about that and using it still because that's me. And I found more homes with a 2-person deployed team and GISers than a 33-person PDA team who are putting in addresses individually by flying over the home. And we weren't even using like point cloud data or anything else where we have these shapes of homes that are missing. There's a whole other thing there. So Joel, you're coming back on. We're going to be talking about tech. Pete will come back on and talk about leading the mission. And also, because you brought up Nima, I know she's not the president anymore, but Erica Borneman, she's been on here a couple times. Big shout out to her. But for the sake of our field, Joel, I'll leave it with you. Closing note on why we should be using Bright Harbor outside of like literally everything we just said.
Though you said no sales pitch.
I know it's the end. Yeah.
I think that society needs to invest in both preparing for and recovering from disasters in a world where it's going to happen much more often to a much greater extent. And I do think, at least right now, Bright Harbor is really the only technology forward solution to that. And I think we can be an amazing partner for communities, both local, and state level. Want to find more partners that want to invest in technology and data.
Where do we go if we want to learn more about Bright Harbor?
BrightHarbor.com.
Fantastic. And because I always do this when Pete comes on, check out FEMA Pete if you want to learn how to become a better leader. Gotcha, Pete. BrightHarbor.com and FEMA Pete. We'll put that in our show notes. Guys, thank you so much for coming on, letting me be the fanboy for a second there on the technology. I get really excited about that. But it is true. And, I'm not just blowing smoke. I never blow smoke. We need better tech, and survivors do need help the entire process, not these touch points. And from a guy who's helped out a lot of survivors up close and personal and watching them through that process, my heart breaks for them. And so any tool that can come through and make their lives easier and take things off the emergency manager's plate, I think is a good thing. And so I wish you the best of luck. And Joel, see you on for that technology episode.
Thanks,
and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.
Take care, guys.
Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, we'll see you guys.